The colony ship from Earth had been drifting through space for 3 months when Jake first heard about the elves. Jake Morrison was 28 years old and worked as a senior mechanic in the lower decks of the mining station orbiting Mars. 7. The red planet below them glowed like a rusty marble against the black void of space. Every morning Jake would wake up in his small quarters and walk through the metal corridors to reach the main hangar where broken shuttles waited for repair. He loved his job even though most people thought fixing ships was boring work. His hands knew every bolt and wire in those machines, and he could hear when an engine was sick just by listening to its hum. The day everything changed started like any other. Jake was eating his breakfast of protein paste and synthetic coffee in the mess hall when the announcement came through the speakers. A delegation from the Stellar Alliance would arrive in 2 hours. Everyone must be at their stations and on their best behavior. Jake had heard stories about the Stellar Alliance from the older workers. They were a group of advanced alien species who controlled most of the galaxy. Humans had only been in space for 50 years and were still considered primitive by galactic standards. The Alliance watched new species to decide if they were worthy of joining their community. He finished his meal and headed to the hangar, where his supervisor Sam was already panicking about the state of their work. Jake helped move the damaged parts behind storage containers and cleaned the oil stains from the floor. They had just finished when the massive doors of the docking bay began to open. The ship that entered was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It looked like it was made from liquid silver that flowed and shifted as it moved. Through the transparent sections he could see forests and waterfalls inside, as if someone had captured a piece of paradise and put it in a spaceship. When the ship landed, a ramp extended and 3 figures walked out. 2 were tall beings in golden robes who moved with perfect grace. The third was smaller and wore armor that changed colors from deep blue to purple as she walked. Her long silver hair floated around her as if she was underwater, and her pointed ears marked her as one of the legendary space elves. But what really caught Jake's attention were the 3 small creatures flying around her. They looked like tiny dragons, each no bigger than a cat. One was bright red and seemed to leave small sparks in the air. Another was deep blue with wings that crackled with electricity. The third was golden and glowed with a warm light. The woman noticed Jake staring and walked toward him while the 2 taller elves went to meet the station commander. Her violet eyes studied him with curiosity as her dragon circled around her head. The red dragon made a sound like a chirp and flew closer to Jake, hovering just out of reach. She spoke, and her voice sounded like music made from starlight. She said her name was Luna and asked what Jake did on the station. When he explained he was a mechanic, she smiled and said that humans were known for their ability to fix things that others considered broken. Luna told him she was the daughter of High Commander Theron, one of the tall elves who had gone to the meeting. She had come along because she was curious about humans. Her people had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years. But humans were special because they had reached space so quickly without magic or gifts from older species. The blue dragon suddenly flew down and landed on Jake's shoulder. He froze, not knowing what to do, but Luna laughed and said Storm liked him. The dragon was surprisingly light and made a purring sound like a cat. Jake carefully reached up and touched its smooth scales, which felt warm and tingly with electricity. Luna introduced the other dragons too. The red one was Ember, who she said had a temper but was loyal. The golden one was Spark, who could sense emotions and always knew when someone was lying. They were not pets exactly, but companions who had chosen to bond with her when she was young. Over the next few days, while the Alliance delegation had meetings with the station leaders, Luna kept returning to the hangar. She would sit on empty crates and watch Jake work, asking questions about human technology and telling him stories about other worlds. Her dragons would explore the hangar, playing with tools and chasing the cleaning robots. Jake learned that Luna was 300 years old, though she looked like she was 25 in human years. She was a warrior and explorer who had fought in battles against space pirates and discovered new planets. She showed him scars from her adventures, including one from a creature with acid blood that had almost killed her on a jungle moon. But she also had a gentle side and would bring him food from her ship. Strange fruits that tasted like sunshine and bread that stayed warm for hours. She taught him words in her language and laughed when he pronounced them wrong. Her dragons began to trust him too often, curling up near him while he worked. One evening, Luna found Jake alone, in the hangar working late on a damaged shuttle. The station lights were dimmed for night cycle, and only the glow from his welding torch lit the area. She sat closer to him than usual and asked why he worked so hard when others had gone to rest. Jake explained that he grew up on Earth in a small town where his father had been a mechanic too. Working with his hands and fixing broken things made him feel connected to his dad, who had died 5 years ago. Luna listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she placed her hand on his arm. She said that humans were special because they found meaning in simple things. Other species had magic or technology or long lives, but humans had something else. They had passion and determination that burned bright even though their lives were short. This was why many in the Alliance were afraid of humans, because that passion could change the galaxy. Before Jake could respond, an alarm began blaring through the station. The lights turned red, and a voice announced that unidentified ships were approaching. Luna jumped up, and her dragons immediately flew to her side, forming a protective circle. She looked at Jake with an expression he had never seen before, a mixture of excitement and concern. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the observation window where they could see 3 dark ships approaching the station. They had no lights or markings and moved in a way that seemed wrong, like they were sliding through space rather than flying. Luna whispered a word in her language that Jake did not understand, but from her tone he knew it meant trouble. The ships belonged to the Void Pirates, the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy. According to Luna, they raided colonies and stations, taking whatever they wanted and leaving no witnesses. The station had no real defenses, just some mining lasers that would be useless against military shields. Luna turned to Jake and said something that would change his life forever. She said the pirates were not here by accident. They were looking for something her father had hidden on the station months ago, an artifact that could destroy entire star systems if used wrongly. She needed his help to protect it, because she believed humans had a special kind of courage that even elves respected. Jake looked at this alien princess with her tiny dragons and impossible beauty, asking him to help save the galaxy. He thought about his quiet life fixing shuttles and how he had never done anything truly important. But when Luna squeezed his hand and said, "Be brave, human," something inside him awakened. He nodded and said he would help, not knowing that her father was watching everything through hidden sensors. The High Commander had planned all of this as a test. He wanted to see if humans were truly ready to join the Alliance and if this particular human was worthy of his daughter's obvious affection. Jake followed Luna through the station corridors as alarms continued to echo off the metal walls. Her 3 dragons flew ahead, scouting for danger while she explained the situation in hurried whispers. The artifact her father had hidden was called the Heart of Shadows, and it had been stolen from an ancient temple on a dead world. The heart was a crystal sphere that contained the power of a collapsed star. According to legend, it could be used to create or destroy entire solar systems. The Alliance had kept it hidden for thousands of years, but somehow the Void Pirates had discovered its location. They reached a section of the station Jake had never seen before. Luna pressed her hand against what looked like a solid wall, and symbols appeared, glowing with soft blue light. The wall dissolved, revealing a hidden room filled with alien technology and weapons. She moved to a cabinet and pulled out a device that looked like a silver bracelet. She placed it on Jake's wrist, and it immediately adjusted to fit perfectly. The metal felt alive against his skin, warm and pulsing with energy. Luna explained it was a shield generator that would protect him from energy weapons, but it would only work 3 times before needing to recharge Storm. The blue dragon landed on Jake's shoulder again, and Luna smiled despite the danger. She said Storm had chosen Jake as a secondary companion, which was rare for dragon kind. It meant the dragon would protect him as if he were family. Jake felt the small creature nuzzle against his neck and was surprised by how comforting it felt. The station shook as the pirate ships docked with force. Luna grabbed 2 weapons from the wall, one for herself and one for Jake. His was a pulse rifle that felt lighter than it looked and hummed with power when he touched the trigger. She showed him quickly how to adjust the settings from stun to kill. They could hear fighting in the distance as the station's small security force tried to stop the pirates. Luna led Jake through maintenance tunnels he had worked in many times but never knew connected to secret areas. Her dragons flew silently ahead, their eyes glowing in the darkness. Luna stopped suddenly and pressed against the tunnel wall. She whispered that she could sense the pirates were already near the artifact's hiding place. Her father had placed it in the station's power core, knowing most species would not risk going near the radiation. But void pirates were not most species. They had modified their bodies to survive in extreme conditions. Jake suggested they could use the maintenance systems to their advantage. He knew every pipe and wire in this section and could create distractions or traps. Luna looked at him with surprise and something else that might have been admiration. She said humans always found creative solutions where others saw only problems. They emerged from the tunnels near the power core, where 10 pirates were trying to break through the reinforced door. Jake had never seen void pirates before and wished he still had. Not they were tall and thin with gray skin that seemed to absorb light. Their faces had no features except for a mouth full of sharp teeth, and they moved in ways that hurt to watch. Luna did not hesitate. She moved like flowing water, her sword appearing in her hand as if from nowhere. The blade sang as it cut through the air, and one pirate fell before the others even noticed she was there. Her dragons attacked as well, Ember breathing small jets of fire that burned through armor, Storm creating lightning that jumped between enemies, and Spark blinding them with bursts of golden light. Jake remembered his training from the security drills and took position behind some equipment. He fired the pulse rifle, surprised by how steady his hands were. The weapon knocked 2 pirates back, but their shields absorbed most of the damage. He adjusted the setting higher and tried again. One pirate noticed him and charged with inhuman speed. Jake barely got his shield up in time as the creature slashed with claws that extended from its fingers. The shield flared and held, but Jake could feel it weaken. He stumbled back and fired point blank into the pirate's chest. Finally dropping it, Luna was fighting 3 at once, her movements so fast Jake could barely follow. She seemed to dance between their attacks, never where they expected her to be. Her sword left trails of silver light in the air, and her armor shifted colors, constantly making it hard to focus on her. But more pirates were coming through the station. Jake could hear them in the corridors approaching. Fast, Luna grabbed a device from her belt and threw it at the power core door. It attached and began glowing with increasing intensity. She yelled for Jake to get down just before it exploded. The blast knocked everyone back but did not damage the door as she had planned. Instead, it triggered the station's emergency protocols, and blast shields slammed down, sealing the corridor. The remaining pirates were trapped with them, but at least no more could arrive immediately. In the confusion, Jake saw one pirate grab Ember, who had gotten too close. The red dragon shrieked and breathed fire, but the pirate held on. Luna turned with fury in her eyes and moved faster than Jake had ever seen anyone move. Her sword went straight through the pirate's chest, and it dropped Ember, who flew weakly back to her. The last 2 pirates tried to retreat but found the blast doors blocked their escape. They turned to fight, but Luna gave them no chance. Her dragons attacked together, Storm paralyzing them with electricity while Spark blinded them, and Ember, despite being hurt, burned through their weapons. Luna finished them with 2 precise strikes. The corridor was suddenly quiet except for the hum of the power core. Luna rushed to check on Ember, who was making small, painful sounds. The little red dragon had burns on his wings, from where the pirate had grabbed him. She pulled a vial from her armor and carefully applied the liquid to his injuries. Jake approached carefully and asked if Ember would be okay. Luna nodded, but he could see tears in her violet eyes. She explained that dragons felt pain more intensely than most creatures because their nervous systems were designed for heightened awareness, but they also healed faster than almost any other species. She stood and walked to the power core door, placing her hand on the metal. Jake watched as she spoke in her musical language, and the door responded by opening. She turned to him with a serious expression and said, "The heart of shadows was inside, but it was protected by defenses that would kill most species." Jake asked what made it safe for her, and she explained that elves had a natural resistance to radiation and energy fields that would be fatal to humans. She would have to go in alone while he watched for more pirates. But Jake shook his head and said he was not letting her go. Alone, Luna argued that his shield generator would not protect him from the radiation inside the core. But Jake had an idea. He ran to a nearby storage locker and pulled out a maintenance suit designed for emergency reactor repairs. It was bulky and old, but it would give him 10 minutes of protection, maybe 15 if he was lucky. Luna stared at him as he put on the suit and said humans were impossibly stubborn. She warned him that if something went wrong, she might not be able to save him, but Jake sealed the helmet and said through the speaker that she had asked him to be brave, and that meant not letting her face danger alone. Together they entered the power core chamber. The heat hit them immediately, even through their protection. The heart of shadows floated in the center of the room, suspended between 3 energy beams. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A perfect sphere that seemed to contain an entire galaxy of stars. Luna approached it carefully while her dragon stayed near the door, except for Storm, who remained on Jake's shoulder. She began to sing in her language, and the sphere responded by pulsing with dark light. She reached out slowly and touched it with both hands. The moment she made contact, the sphere exploded with energy that knocked Jake against the wall. His suit screamed warnings as the radiation levels spiked beyond safe limits. Through his helmet, he could see Luna surrounded by a corona of dark energy, her hair whipping around her as if in a hurricane. She was trying to contain the heart's power, but something was wrong. The sphere was fighting her, pulsing with increasing violence. Jake realized the pirates must have done something to destabilize it. If Luna lost control, the station and everyone on it would be vaporized. Without thinking, Jake pushed himself off the wall and stumbled toward her. The radiation meter on his suit had turned red, and he could feel the heat even through the protective layers. He reached out and grabbed Luna's arm, and the moment he touched her, something incredible happened. The chaotic energy suddenly calmed, flowing from the sphere through Luna and into Jake. But instead of destroying him, it felt warm and peaceful, like coming home after a long journey. Luna turned to look at him with amazement in her eyes, and together, they lifted the heart of shadows from its containment. Later, Luna would tell him that humans had a unique ability to ground magical energy that other species produced. It was why humans had no magic of their own, because they were designed to be stabilizers for the cosmic forces that others wielded. But in that moment, all Jake knew was that they were alive, and the heart was secure. They emerged from the power core with the heart of shadows secure in a containment field Luna had generated. Jake pulled off his radiation suit helmet, gasping for cooler air while checking the readings on his wrist display. The suit had absorbed dangerous levels of radiation and would need to be destroyed. But he was alive. Luna was staring at him with an expression he could not read. Her violet eyes seemed to glow in the dim emergency lighting of the corridor. She reached out and touched his face gently, as if making sure he was real. Her fingers were cool against his skin, and he felt that same electric sensation from when they had shared the heart's power storm, chirped from Jake's shoulder and nuzzled against his jaw while Ember flew weakly around them, still recovering from his injuries. Spark hovered near Luna's head, making soft singing sounds that seemed to communicate something Jake did not understand. Luna smiled and said the dragons were thanking him for saving their companion. The station alarms had stopped, but they could hear voices in the distance. The security forces were sweeping the station for any remaining pirates. Luna said they needed to get the heart to her father immediately. But first, she wanted to check on the station's casualties. She cared about humans more than she had expected. They made their way to the medical bay where injured security officers and station workers were being treated. The doctor, an older woman named Helen, looked up in surprise when an elf warrior walked in with 3 small dragons. Jake watched as Luna moved between the injured, speaking soft words and touching their wounds. Where she touched people, their injuries began to heal. Not completely, but enough to stabilize them until proper treatment. Helen asked how this was possible, and Luna explained that elves had limited healing abilities, but it drained their energy quickly. Jake noticed she was getting paler with each person she helped. He pulled her aside after the 5th patient and said she needed to stop before she exhausted herself. Luna tried to argue but stumbled, and he caught her before she fell. Her dragons immediately surrounded them, chirping with concern, while Storm landed on her chest as if trying to share his electrical energy with her. Jake helped her sit on an empty medical bed and got her water from the dispenser. She drank slowly, and color gradually returned to her face. She looked at him and said, "Humans were strange creatures who worried about others even when they barely knew them. Jake replied that she had been doing the same thing by healing strangers. Dr. Helen approached them and quietly thanked Luna for what she had done. She said 2 of the officers would have died without her intervention. Then she looked at Jake and scanned him with a medical device. Her eyes widened at the radiation readings, and she immediately prepared treatment injections. Luna stood up quickly, saying Jake had absorbed the radiation to save everyone. Helen looked confused but began treating him anyway. The injections burned as they entered his bloodstream, but Jake could feel them working to repair the cellular damage. As Helen worked, Luna held his hand, and he was surprised to find comfort in that simple gesture. High Commander Theron arrived at the medical bay with several elf guards. His tall form filled the doorway, and his golden eyes immediately found his daughter. He spoke to her in their language, his tone suggesting both concern and disapproval. Luna responded firmly, and Jake heard his name mentioned several times. The commander switched to English and addressed Jake directly. He said Luna had told him everything about how Jake had helped contain the heart of shadows. No human had ever been able to channel cosmic energy before, and the implications were significant. He wanted Jake to come with them to the Alliance Council. Jake started to protest that he was just a mechanic, but Luna squeezed his hand. She told him this was bigger than just one incident. The Alliance had been debating whether humans were ready to join the galactic community, and what happened today would change many minds. Humans might be the key to stabilizing the increasing cosmic instabilities. Before Jake could respond, another alarm sounded, but this one was different. It was the station's proximity alert, meaning ships were approaching. Commander Theron checked his communication device, and his expression darkened. More void. Pirate ships were coming, and this time they were bringing a fleet. The commander began giving orders in multiple languages. His guards moved to defensive positions while Luna stood, despite still being weak from healing others. She told Jake they had maybe 20 minutes before the pirates arrived. The station could not survive an assault from an entire fleet. Jake had an idea, but it was crazy enough that it might work. He asked if the Heart of Shadows could be used as a weapon. Luna said, yes, but the power would destroy anyone who tried to channel it alone. Even she could not control that much energy without burning up from the inside. But Jake remembered what had happened in the power core. When they had touched, the energy had stabilized. He suggested they could work together using their strange connection to channel the heart's power safely. Commander Theron immediately said it was too dangerous, and he would not risk his daughters. Life Luna turned to her father with fire in her eyes. She said the station had 8,000 humans on it, including families with children. If they did nothing, all those people would die. She was a warrior of the Alliance and had sworn to protect innocent lives, even at the cost of her own. Argument continued in their language with increasing intensity, while Jake watched the scanner showing the approaching fleet, 15 ships, each one larger than the station. They were outnumbered and outgunned, with no hope of escape or rescue in time. Something had to be done. Storm suddenly flew from Jake's shoulder to the commander, landing on his arm. The blue dragon stared into his eyes and made a series of sounds that seemed important. Theron looked shocked and turned to his daughter, asking if it was true. Luna nodded and said Storm had chosen Jake as a secondary companion, which had not happened in 1,000 years. The commander studied Jake for a long moment, then asked if he understood what he was proposing. Using the heart as a weapon would require perfect synchronization between him and Luna. One mistake and both would be consumed by the energy. Jake said he understood, but those 8,000 people were worth the risk. Theron was quiet for several seconds, then pulled something. From his robes, it was a crystal pendant on a silver chain which he placed around Jake's neck. He said it was a protection charm that had been in his family for 3 millennia. It would not save Jake if things went wrong, but it might give him a few extra seconds to break the connection. Luna hugged her father, and Jake saw tears in the commander's eyes as he whispered something in their language. Then Theron stepped back and began organizing the evacuation of non-essential personnel to the center of the station, away from the outer hull where the battle would take place. Jake and Luna ran to the observation deck where they would have a clear view of the approaching fleet. Her dragons flew around them in a protective formation as they prepared. The Heart of Shadows floated between them in its containment field, pulsing with dark energy that seemed eager to be released. Luna explained that they would need to create a directed energy wave that would disable the pirate ships without destroying them completely. The goal was to overload their systems and force them to retreat, not to commit genocide even against pirates. She asked if Jake was ready. He looked at her, beautiful and terrible in her color, shifting armor with tiny dragons circling her head. This alien princess had asked him to be brave, and he had grabbed onto that challenge without hesitation. Now he was about to channel the power of a collapsed star with someone he had known for less than a week. But when Luna reached out her hands to him, he took them without fear. They stood facing each other with the heart floating between them, and as the first pirate ships entered weapons range, they began to channel its power. The sphere responded immediately, sending tendrils of dark energy into both of them. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to hold back an ocean with his bare hands. Jake could feel the power wanting to consume him, to burn through every cell in his body. But he also felt Luna, her presence cool and calming in his mind, guiding the energy into patterns he could never understand alone. Together they raised their joined hands toward the viewport and released the heart's power in a controlled wave. The observation deck windows automatically darkened to protect anyone watching as a beam of impossible darkness shot toward the pirate fleet. It spread out like a net of shadows, catching all 15 ships in its grasp. The pirate vessels' shields flared and died. Their engines went dark, and they began to drift. Several tried to fire weapons, but the energy systems exploded instead of activating. Within 30 seconds, the entire fleet was disabled, floating helplessly in space. While escape pods launched from each ship, Jake and Luna held the beam for another moment, making sure all the pirates had abandoned their ships, then slowly pulled the power back. The Heart of Shadows dimmed and settled back into its containment field, apparently satisfied with the destruction it had caused. They released each other's hands, and Jake stumbled. Luna caught him before he fell, and he realized he was shaking from the effort. His whole body felt like he had run a marathon while being struck by lightning. But they were alive, and the station was safe. The pirate fleet was destroyed, and according to the scanners, Alliance ships were already arriving to collect the escape pods. The Alliance ships that arrived were unlike anything Jake had seen before, massive vessels that looked like they were carved from starlight itself. As he stood with Luna on the observation deck watching them collect the pirate escape pods, he noticed his hands were still trembling from channeling the Heart's power. Commander Theron returned with news that shocked everyone. The attack had not been random. The Void Pirates had been hired by a faction within the Alliance itself who opposed humanity, joining the galactic community. They feared what humans might become if given access to advanced technology and knowledge. Luna was furious when she heard this. Her armor shifted to deep red as she paced the observation deck with her dragons mirroring her agitation. She said there had always been those who feared change, but to hire pirates and risk innocent lives was beyond forgiveness. Even her father looked troubled by the revelation. The commander explained that the Alliance Council was demanding Jake and Luna appear before them immediately. What had happened with the Heart of Shadows had been observed by sensors across the sector. No human had ever channeled cosmic energy before, and the Council wanted answers about what this meant. Jake protested that he needed to help with repairs to the station, but Sam, his supervisor, arrived and told him to go. He said Jake had done more than enough, and the story of what happened was already spreading through the station. Everyone knew the mechanic, who had stood with an elf princess to save them all. 3 hours later, Jake found himself on an Alliance ship, heading toward the capital world of the Confederation. He had never left the Mars system before, and now he was traveling faster than light, toward a planet he could not even pronounce. The name of Luna sat beside him, trying to prepare him for what was coming. She explained that the council consisted of representatives from 12 species, including the elves. Each had their own interests and fears about humanity. Some, like the Crystalline Collective, saw humans as useful potential allies. Others, like the Void, Touched, who lived in dark space between galaxies, thought humans were too violent and unpredictable. The journey took 2 days. during which Luna taught Jake about alliance politics and customs. Her dragons had become completely comfortable with him, often sleeping curled against him while he studied Storm, especially seemed to have adopted him, following him everywhere, and chirping warnings when anyone approached. On the second day, Luna found Jake in the ship's observation lounge staring at the streaks of light that passed as they traveled through hyperspace. She sat beside him and asked what he was thinking about. He admitted he was scared not of the council but of letting her down. She looked at him with surprise and said he could never let her down. He had shown more courage in the past few days than most beings showed in their entire lives. Then she told him something that changed everything. She said her father had not hidden the Heart of Shadows by accident. He had placed it there as a test. The test was not just for humanity, but for her as well. Theron had known she was developing feelings for Jake and wanted to see if a human and elf could truly work together. The Heart of Shadows responded only to perfectly matched partners, and their success had proven something important. Jake asked what it had proven, and Luna smiled. She said it had proven that the universe was changing. Humans were not just another species joining the alliance, but catalysts who would transform everything they touched. For better or worse, the galaxy would never be the same. After humanity joined, they arrived at the capital world, which was called Synthesis in the common tongue. The planet was impossible, covering in massive cities that floated in the clouds, connected by bridges of light. The council chamber was at the center of the largest city inside, a structure that looked like a frozen star. Jake had never felt so out of place walking into the chamber, wearing his best mechanic uniform while surrounded by beings who had technology that looked like magic. The council members sat in a circle, each one different and strange. The crystalline being looked like living diamond, while the aquatic member floated in a sphere of water. Commander Theron spoke first, presenting the facts of what had happened at the Mars 7 station. Several council members interrupted with questions in languages the translator struggled with, but the general tone was clear. Many were afraid of what Jake represented. Then it was Jake's turn to speak. He stood in the center of the circle, feeling very small and very human. He did not try to give a grand speech or profound wisdom. Instead, he talked about fixing shuttles and how his father had taught him that broken things could always be repaired if you understood how they worked. He said humans were not perfect, but neither was anyone else in the room. They all had fears and hopes, dreams and nightmares. The difference was that humans had only been in space for 50 years and were still learning. They made mistakes, but they also adapted faster than anyone expected. One council member, A, being made of pure energy, asked why Jake had risked his life for beings he did not know. Jake thought about it and said because it was the right thing to do. Humans did not always need complex reasons to help others. Sometimes they just saw someone in trouble and acted. The council debated for hours while Jake and Luna waited outside. Storm stayed on his shoulder the entire time, occasionally nuzzling his cheek when his anxiety spiked. Ember and Spark flanked Luna, who paced back and forth, her armor shifting through a rainbow of colors. Finally, they were called back in. The council had reached a decision by a narrow margin. Humanity would be granted provisional membership in the Alliance with full membership, to be reviewed in 10 years. But there was a condition: Jake and Luna would serve as the first human-elf partnership in the new cultural exchange program. This program would pair humans with other species to foster understanding and prevent the fears that had led to the pirate attack. Jake would leave his job as a mechanic and become an official liaison, working with Luna to solve problems across Alliance space. It was a massive change from his quiet life, fixing shuttles. Luna looked at him, waiting for his response. The entire council watched as Jake considered the offer. He thought about his small quarters on Mars 7, his predictable routine and safe existence. Then he looked at Luna, with her impossible beauty and fierce spirit, her loyal dragons and the promise of adventures among the stars. He said yes, and the council chamber erupted in discussion. Some members seemed pleased while others were clearly unhappy, but the decision was made and official documents were prepared. Jake Morrison, mechanic from Earth, was now the first human ambassador to the Stellar Alliance that night on the ship heading back to Mars. 7. Luna found Jake standing in the cargo bay trying to process everything that had happened. She approached him slowly, and said he could still change his mind. No one would blame him for wanting his old life back. Jake turned to her and asked if she wanted him to change his mind. She was quiet for a moment, then admitted she did not. She had never expected to care about a human, but something about him was different. Maybe it was his bravery or his kindness or the way he treated her dragons like they were precious. Or maybe, she said, stepping closer, it was the way he had grabbed her hand when she asked him to be brave, not knowing her father was watching through the station's sensors, not knowing it was a test, not knowing anything except that she needed help. He had not hesitated, just reached out and changed both their lives. Jake realized then that Commander Theron had been testing more than just courage. He had been testing whether a human could love his daughter and whether she could love them back. The Heart of Shadows had proven they were compatible on an energy level, but their actions had proven something more important. They stood close together in the cargo bay while 3 small dragons circled them. Luna asked what Jake wanted from this new life, and he said he wanted to learn everything about the galaxy and help bring humans and aliens together. But mostly he admitted he wanted to see where this connection between them would lead. Luna smiled and her armor shifted to a warm golden color that matched spark scales. She said her father had told her something before they left. He said he had been watching Jake from the moment Luna first visited the hangar, and he had seen something that convinced him humans were special. Jake asked what he had seen, and Luna laughed. She said her father had watched Jake spend 3 hours fixing a cleaning robot that was not even his responsibility. Just because he noticed it was broken, he did not get paid extra or receive any recognition, but he fixed it anyway, because that was who he was. That simple act of kindness toward a machine had convinced the High Commander that humans had the capacity for compassion that the Alliance desperately needed. They did not just fix broken technology, but broken relationships, broken trust, and maybe even broken galaxies. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison had left his job as a mechanic to become humanity's first ambassador to the Stellar Alliance. He stood on the bridge of the ship Silver Dawn, looking at the latest crisis they had been sent to resolve. A colony of peaceful beings called the Whisperfolk were under threat from an expanding black hole. Luna stood beside him studying the data, while her 3 dragons perched on various console edges. Storm had grown slightly larger and now spent equal time between Jake and Luna. Ember had fully recovered from his injuries and was as temperamental as ever. Spark had developed an ability to sense danger before it happened. Their partnership had grown stronger with each mission. They had stopped a war between 2 species who had misunderstood each other's communication methods. They had rescued miners trapped in an asteroid that turned out to be a sleeping space creature. They had even discovered a lost human colony ship that had been drifting for 30 years. But this mission was different. The black hole was not natural but had been created by an ancient weapon that the Whisper folk had accidentally activated. They needed someone who could channel enough energy to reverse the weapon's effect before their entire solar system was consumed. Jake and Luna had brought the Heart of Shadows with them, knowing it might be their only chance. The artifact had been officially placed in their custody after the Council recognized that they were the only ones who could use it safely, but using it to stop a black hole would require more power than they had ever channeled before. The Whisper folk were ethereal beings who looked like living mist with voices so soft, the translator barely picked them up. Their leader, a being called Gentle Song, explained that the weapon was from a war fought millions of years ago. They had found it while mining and activated it by mistake. Luna calculated they had less than 10 hours before the black hole became irreversible. After that, nothing would be able to escape its pull, and 3 inhabited planets would be destroyed along with stations and ships containing millions of lives. The Alliance fleet was evacuating who they could, but there was not enough time for everyone. Jake suggested something that made even Luna pause. He wanted to fly directly into the black hole's event horizon while channeling the heart's power. The only way to reverse the weapon was to destabilize it from within, but that meant almost certain death for whoever attempted it. Luna immediately said no, and her dragons reacted to her distress by flying agitated circles around the bridge. She argued there had to be another way, but the calculations were clear. Someone had to carry the heart into the black hole and channel its power from inside. Commander Theron arrived on an emergency jump with 3 of the most powerful elf mages in existence. He had been monitoring the situation and knew what Jake was planning. He pulled his daughter aside and they argued in their language for several minutes while Jake made preparations. Finally, Luna returned with tears in her violet eyes. She said her father had reminded her that Jake was not just her partner, but a warrior. In his own right, she could not take away his choice to save millions of lives even if it meant losing him, but she had a different plan. She would go with him. Their connection made them stronger together, and they had a better chance of surviving. If they channeled the power as one, Jake tried to argue, but she placed her hand over his mouth and said he had been brave for her, so now she would be brave for him. They prepared the Silver Dawn for the journey into the black hole the ship had been, modified with elf technology and human ingenuity, creating a hybrid that could withstand forces that would destroy normal vessels. The Heart of Shadows was placed in a special chamber connected to the pilots. Seats, Storm, Ember, and Spark refused to leave despite Luna ordering them to stay. She finally gave up when Storm bit her hand hard enough to draw blood, making his position clear. The 3 dragons would face whatever came together with their companions, just as they always had. The journey toward the black hole was terrifying. Space itself bent and twisted around them while the ship groaned under impossible pressures. Jake flew while Luna maintained their shields using a combination of technology and magic that should not have worked, but somehow did as they approached the event horizon. Time began to dilate. Minutes felt like hours while seconds stretched into eternity. Jake could see the Whisperfolk planets being pulled toward destruction and the evacuation ships struggling to escape the gravitational pull. They had one chance to get this right. They crossed the event horizon and reality shattered around them. Inside the black hole was not darkness, but blinding light that existed in impossible colors. The ancient weapon hung at the center, a massive structure that looked like it was made from crystallized space itself. Jake and Luna joined hands over the Heart of Shadows and began to channel its power. The sensation was beyond anything they had experienced before, like trying to hold back the birth of a universe. The weapon resisted, fighting against their attempt to shut it down. The dragons added their power to the effort, Storm channeling lightning through the ship's systems, Ember heating the heart until it glowed like a miniature sun, and Spark creating a barrier of light that protected them from the worst of the black hole's effects. But it was not enough. Jake felt himself beginning to burn from the inside out. The power was too much, even with Luna sharing the load. He looked at her and saw the same pain in her eyes. They were going to die here, but at least they would save millions of lives. It was a good death, a meaningful death. Then something unexpected happened. The crystal pendant. Commander Theron had given Jake began to glow. It was not just a protection charm, but a connection to every elf who had worn it for 3,000 years. The accumulated power of generations flowed through it, giving them just enough strength to push forward. Luna sang in her ancient language a song of unmaking that reversed the weapon's activation. The crystallized space began to crack and shatter. The black hole started to collapse, not inward, but outward, releasing the matter it had consumed back into normal space, but they were still inside and the explosion would destroy them. Jake tried to fly the ship out, but the controls were dead from the energy overload. Luna was barely conscious, the effort having drained her completely. The dragons huddled together, knowing the end was near. Jake refused to give up. He grabbed the manual controls that he had installed himself, remembering his days as a mechanic when he fixed things everyone else had written off. The ship responded sluggishly, but it responded. They began to move toward what had been the event horizon. The black hole exploded just as they crossed the threshold. The force sent them tumbling through space with shields failing and hull breaching. Jake held Luna tight as the ship came apart, around them waiting for the end, but the end did not come. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by Alliance ships that had formed a catch field using their combined tractor beams. Commander Theron had positioned the fleet to save them, knowing they would need help escaping. They were pulled aboard the command ship where medical teams waited. Luna was unconscious but alive. The dragons curled protectively around her. Jake collapsed the moment he knew she was safe. his body finally giving into the strain of channeling so much power. He woke up 3 days later in the medical bay with Storm sleeping on his chest. The blue dragon chirped happily when he opened his eyes and immediately flew off, presumably to tell Luna Jake tried to sit up, but his body felt like it was made of lead. Luna appeared moments later, moving carefully as she was still recovering. She sat on his bed and took his hand, saying nothing for a long moment. Then she told him what had happened after they escaped. The Whisper folk were saved along with 3 planets and millions of lives. The ancient weapon was destroyed and the black hole completely reversed. The Alliance Council had awarded them both the Star of Valor, the highest honor that could be given, but more importantly, their actions had proven that humans belonged in the Alliance. The faction that had opposed humanity had publicly apologized and pledged support. Several species had requested human partners for their own exchange programs. Earth would never be alone again. Jake asked about the dragons and Luna smiled. All 3 had recovered, though they refused to leave either of them during recovery. Storm had actually bitten a doctor who tried to move him from Jake's chest. Ember had set a medical cart on fire, and Spark had blinded 3 nurses with defensive flashes. They laughed together, and Jake realized this was his life now. Not fixing shuttles in a quiet hangar, but flying into black holes with an elf princess and 3 small dragons. Not the life he had planned, but the life he had chosen when she asked him to be brave commander. Theron visited later and did something unexpected. He formally acknowledged Jake as family according to elf tradition. The pendant had accepted him during the crisis, proving he was worthy. In elf culture, this was equivalent to adoption, though the implications were more complex. Luna explained later that it meant her father saw Jake as a potential life companion for her. Elves lived for thousands of years and chose their partners carefully. The fact that Theron had given his blessing so quickly was unprecedented, but he had been watching them and seen something rare. Jake asked what he had seen, and Luna smiled. She said her father had seen the same thing. The Heart of Shadows had recognized 2 souls that completed each other, human and elf, different in every way, but perfectly matched in the ways that mattered.